I wrote Phantom Pain sort of to answer my own questions. I started, my first job in the Office of Archives and History was as a reference archivist. One of our charges was to find a project to work on. And there had been, from the time I started, a series of about 5 boxes kind of down at the bottom of a shelf that said artificial limbs collection. I pulled out those boxes. They were basically arranged loosely alphabetical by surname. There were some things that weren't. And I thought, well, this is great. Here are records that are arranged by people's names. They are Confederate veterans, and the records started in about 1866. The federal government had already been doing a similar program, so it wasn't that we came up with this on our own. During the war, in fact, the federal government was providing amputees with artificial limbs. We were the first of the former Confederate states to pass legislation to get a program for artificial limbs for Confederate veterans. And what happened after that is the stipulations of the resolution were that the sheriffs in each county were to go out and count maimed veterans in their county. So there were more arms lost than legs, but they also decided that at the time the arms weren't that useful. So they were going to really focus on the legs because the government's drive was to get people back to work, and they felt that getting people legs to walk on was more important than an arm that wasn't all that useful. So the focus initially was just legs. The state chose the Jewett's Patent Leg Company, which was not necessarily the best leg out there. It was good. It was a fine leg, but another citizen in the state who had purchased a leg from the Jewett Company wrote to the governor and said, well, there's this John T. Ball who's from New Bern who works for that company, and he wants to come home, and he'd be really willing to come and set up an office in Raleigh and manufacture limbs here. By putting the book out, a few of the limbs have surfaced. Duncan Hanna from Red Springs wrote in a letter, if you can't come to the archives to do your research, you can write our correspondence archivist and say, I would like the Confederate pension for my grandfather, Robert Alexander Hanna, and I've got his leg if anybody cares. So Mr. Hanna did not have access to email. I wrote him a letter and told him that I cared. And I didn't really know if he would be able to take pictures and email it to me or anything like that. But a few weeks passed, and I got an email one day that just said, the title was Duncan Hanna, or the subject line was Duncan Hanna, no message at all. And it was just a series of photographs taken in a feed store. So it was this leg and all these feed bags, and you could see somebody's hand holding it, and it was just a variety of angles. And then there was finally this one picture that showed the bottom of the foot, and I could see the screw holes. And I knew how the patent worked, and I knew where the cables went, and I knew it was one of the Jewett's patent legs. The stumps that people had were so ragged and painful that putting this big wooden leg on it to get around was often not desirable for them. They were hot. They hurt the stumps. Yeah, they'd just come up with something at home. Or walk around with a couple of crutches. The state paid for them. They had 2 options going into it. They could have purchased the patent and then purchased the kits, the wood blocks and everything, for a little bit less. Obviously the most cost-effective thing was what they did, and that was just having somebody from the factory come down, and they paid $75. If you thought though the leg wouldn't work for you, or say if you lost your leg from too far down in your leg and what we had commercially available wouldn't work for you, you could just take the money. The legs today versus the legs then, some of them are really high tech. Obviously, I think everybody has seen somebody walking down the street with a metal $6 million man looking contraption that's very high tech. And if you didn't know differently, you wouldn't know that they were an amputee. They're walking comfortably with a leg that it might seem a little stiff, but offers them a very natural gait and comfort. It's lightweight. Not everybody has access to a leg like that. When an amputation is done today, it's they're able to do these flaps of skin that are sewn together carefully. And really, and during the Civil War, the surgeons didn't have a lot of time for reconstructive surgery. Things would be ragged, the skin tucked under and sewed, and bones still fairly close to the surface. And it made it very hard for them to utilize artificial limbs. The phantom pain, which is obviously the name of the book, has to do with the pain of a missing leg or missing arm. It's universal. Almost all amputees report sensing pain in an area that's been amputated. It just, the people at the amputee support group described it. It's, you wake up in the middle of the night and your leg hurts, and it's not there, but it's excruciating. It makes the recovery really difficult. And again, the state sort of had its own phantom pain. It was trying to fix these people, and at the time, people thought that if you could get these injured veterans back to work, that it would ease this pain. Actually, the book's genesis was this list of every person who contacted the state related to having lost a limb or lost the use of a limb during the Civil War. It's the names of the veterans, company and regiment, what county they were from, and then everywhere you can find a document related to their correspondence with the state. The front of the book is a brief history of amputations, sort of the state of medicine at the time, what type of surgery they might have encountered, a history of the state's program, a little bit of an overview of what the other Confederate states, former Confederate states, were doing. People would understand what their ancestor, just so that people would understand what their ancestor experienced.